Imagine you got a call from Motown Records and they said your family had been chosen to replace Michael Jackson and the Jackson 5. It's summer 1971. I'm 12 years old and my family of 10, 4 boys, 4 girls, my mother and my stepfather, we are impoverished. To make money, my mother began singing in nightclubs. But as good as she was, it wasn't good enough. My 7 brothers and sisters and I, who are 7 years apart, we were very close. We did everything together, including singing and pretending we were the Jackson 5. We sang songs like Who's Loving You, ABC, and of course, I Want You Back. One day, Mom asked if we wanted to sing because as a singing family, we could make more money. The next thing you know, we 8 kids are singing in after-hour nightclubs all over Los Angeles on weekends. The Whitney family was born. One Saturday afternoon, we were rehearsing. ABC, as easy as 1, 2, 3. As simple as do, re, mi. ABC, 1, 2, 3. Baby, ring, ring, ring. The phone rang. My mother, not missing a beat, answered the telephone while gesturing for us kids to keep singing. Hello? Who? Say that again? She looked at us, put her finger to her lips, and shh, Michael Jackson's on the phone. Yeah, that Michael Jackson. Stunned, we immediately stopped singing. Then Mom said, hold on. Looking at my 2nd brother, she said, Aaron, he wants to talk to you. After a couple of minutes, Aaron hangs up the phone and shouts, Michael Jackson says he heard of us. He says he's heard I sing and dance just like him. He says for us not to quit. We'll get there someday. Jump forward 6 years to 1977. Everything we touched turned to gold. TV shows, magazines, concerts, Billboard magazine's top 100 twice. Single and album. We were everywhere. What made 1977 even more remarkable was Motown, who had lost the Jackson 5, had chosen us to replace them. Imagine that. We are about to replace the Jackson 5 6 years after Michael Jackson, soon to be king of pop, called our house and said, don't quit. You'll get there someday. Now I ask you, what poor kid could not build dreams for a better life after that? Days away from signing the Motown contract, my older sister screamed upstairs, Keeper, James, Aaron, Daryl, come downstairs, family meeting! I thought to myself, this is it. I'm about to become rich. I'm about to become famous. I ran downstairs, sprinted into the living room. My other brothers and sisters were there already waiting. Seconds later, my mother and stepfather Willie entered. My stepfather sat on the brown recliner and immediately bent over and placed both hands over his face. I thought to myself, is he sick? Mom, who was usually bubbly and outgoing, walked to the middle of the room. She turned around and looked at us, but she wasn't smiling. I didn't know it, but my mother was about to speak the words no brother ever wanted to hear, the words no brother could ever prepare for. Then Mom spoke. Your stepfather has been sexually molesting your sisters for years. I thought, wait, what did she say? And then she said, I have known all along. No! My head was spinning. I didn't know what to say or what to do. I couldn't comprehend what I had just heard. It was like being punched in the gut. I was breathless. But before my three brothers and I could recover, my older sister spun around and pointed a finger at us and said, "You can't talk about it. It didn't happen to you boys. It only happened to us girls. You can't talk about it ever." And like that, relationships between brothers and sisters that could not be broken lay on the living room floor in shambles. Lost and confused, my brothers and I desperately needed to talk to someone. But the people we needed to speak to the most, our sisters, just told us they wanted nothing to do with us. I entered the living room that day, excited finally to end my life of poverty. When I walked out, I was a brother, dazed, scared, confused, betrayed. I was a brother broken. My journey through the bowels of child sexual abuse did not begin with my sisters. It started when I was 6, roughly the same age as my 3 younger sisters, when their abuses began. In 1965, our babysitter sexually abused my older brother and me almost daily for 6 months. And here I was again, 12 years later, experiencing the trauma of child sexual abuse. But the trauma was different this time because I'm not the direct victim. This time it is my 4 little sisters who are the victims. And I am a brother who couldn't protect them, a brother who failed them, a brother who couldn't save them. For years, my brothers and I struggled under the weight of not knowing and being told it didn't happen to us. But it did happen to us. Because whatever child sexual abuse happens in the home, everyone in the home is abused and betrayed, whether they know it or not. For my brothers and I, once we learned what had happened, we were forbidden to share what happened to us. We didn't even talk to each other. I searched for books, articles, anything about the trauma brothers experienced after learning their sisters had been sexually abused by our parents. You see, Google hadn't been launched, so libraries and bookstores were my only options. I found tons of books and articles about the trauma women and girls experience, but there was nothing that addressed the needs of brothers. It was as if society believed that brothers' trauma was somehow irrelevant, or worse, it didn't exist. It certainly wasn't worth discussing. As the years passed, I heard the whispers from my sisters. How could you not know? How could you not suspect? How could you not see my tears, hear my weeping? How could you boys not care? I wanted to scream, but we do care. It's just that you told us we can't talk to you about it, ever. Without those conversations with our sisters, which are our brother's only form of healing and treatment, constant thoughts of woulda, coulda, shoulda, and vivid imaginings of what our sisters went through fester like angry boils beneath our skin, ready to erupt at any moment. My boils did erupt 9 years later. 3 weeks before my wedding in November 1986, I became obsessed with one thought. Before I get married, I must ensure he is never around the girls again. Do whatever it That thought became all consuming to the point I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating, I was losing weight. I had gone to such a dark place, I no longer cared that I was even getting married. I didn't even care about my life. I only cared about one thing: slay the monster. On a warm sunny night on November 8th, I nervously paced my bedroom in the dark, listening, waiting for him to walk out of his and Mom's bedroom. A couple of hours passed, and then I heard it creak. I cracked my bedroom door. There he stood, 6'6", 240 pounds, wearing that huge afro wig that put his height over 7 feet tall. Behind the door was me, 5'8", 145 pounds. I took a deep breath and stepped out of my bedroom, shaking. I slowly walked up to him. When I stopped, my face was at his chest. I arched my neck back as far as it would go, and I looked up the side of that mountain and said, "You have 24 hours to leave this place. If you are still here by this time tomorrow, you will be dead because I will have killed you." You see, my stepfather didn't know it, but the instrument of his death was less than 10 feet away, in my bedroom, resting against my bedroom door. Black, sleek, 3 feet long, weighing 36 ounces, and hailing from Louisville, Kentucky, was my favorite baseball bat. It was waiting for me to wake it so I could hit the greatest home run of my life. Luckily, my stepfather heeded my warning and was gone the next day. He was finally out of the house for good. Years later, in 2017, my wife and I were in bed talking about my still wanting to talk to my sisters. She turned and looked at me and said, "You know you're a victim." I said, "No, I'm not. I'm just telling you how I feel about it. I'm just telling you my sisters are the victims." She said, "Of course they are. But look at you. You're a mess. You're sweating. You're shaking. How can you not see you and your brothers are victims?" Until that moment, I had never realized I was a victim. Because as my sister said, it didn't happen to us. But as I said, it did happen to us boys. Even today, decades later, when I'm alone and I think about how could I have not known, tears start flowing down my face. Of course I'm a victim. The problem for me, like all brothers, is I didn't have an outlet for my trauma. In 2013, I attended a conference in San Diego on how to write a book. I wanted to write the first book from a brother's perspective about the trauma brothers experience once we learn our sisters have been sexually abused by our parents. At that conference, I shared my story. After I finished, I sat down. Within seconds, I was swamped by women saying they wish their brothers could hear my story. Hearing so many women's stories, I didn't know what to say. It was coming at me so fast. My heart was pounding. I needed to catch my breath. So I got up and I left the hall as quickly as possible. But within seconds, the double doors burst open and more women surrounded me saying, I had no idea my brother was dealing with this. Others said, I should have spoken to my brother. But the hardest stories were from 3 women who told me their brothers had committed suicide because they had failed to protect them. Listening to those women's stories, those sisters affirmed for me how important it is that brothers not only have a voice in the child sexual abuse space, but we must have mental and emotional health support for our trauma. When I speak at events, I'm often asked, what's the biggest challenge for brothers? The challenge is threefold. 1, not being invited into the conversation. 2, being expected for our non-participation in the conversation. 3, having to carry the burden in silence because of the first 2. I tell people when brothers are told it didn't happen to us, what we hear is our trauma doesn't matter. Our voices don't matter. We don't matter. So what must a brother do? During the child sexual abuse conversation, when all other groups are talking and they take that momentary exhale, brothers must step into the gap and make our presence known. Because if we don't, we will never receive the emotional and mental health support we need. I've prepared some proven techniques that I'm convinced will help others as they did me and my brothers. I will share a few with you. 1, brothers must accept that even though we may not be the direct victim, we are still victims. Without this acceptance, healing has little hope of success. 2, we must recognize our trauma is now part of our DNA, and like DNA, which is self-replicating, our trauma usually self-replicates in the form of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Usually it manifests in other areas in our life in ways we don't recognize or even understand. 3, we must talk about our trauma. We must be willing to find at least one person with whom we can talk. For me, this was unquestionably the hardest and scariest step, but it is the most essential step. Once I took this step, it was liberating. It was as if the shackles and trauma and fear behind my sister's words, you can't talk about it every day, just fell away. Did it mean my trauma was over? No. What it meant was I was empowered to recapture the essence of who I am as a man and as a brother. In closing, I wish to leave you with these 2 things. I have experienced both sides of the child sexual abuse coin. One side, I am the damaged. The other side, I am the collateral damage. This puts me in the unique and unenviable position of understanding both sides of the child sexual abuse conversation. And this is what I know. The trauma and burdens of each direct and indirect victims, sisters, brothers, women, and men are different, yet they are the same. We all seek the same things: to be believed, to be seen, to be heard, to be understood, to heal. But most importantly, we strive to find a way to empower ourselves so that we may move forward each and every day in hope and happiness. Lastly, I am happy to tell you I have fantastic relationships with 3 of my 4 sisters because I took those 3 steps and more. Even though I was terrified. As the best-selling author Susan Jeffers wrote, I felt the fear and did it anyway. Our relationships are no longer on the floor in shambles. We are healing together. Our relationships are stronger than ever. and we are empowering each other each and every day. Thank you for allowing me to share your stage, and I hope you will join me in the fight of creating a voice for brothers in the child sexual abuse space.